audio, and that was it. And
Okay, here we go. Here we go. You guys ready? We're going on. All right. It's just loading up. Okay, we are live, a little late, but you know what? That's okay, because if there's one thing, those who learn differently know how to, go through adversity. So, guys, welcome to our live stream where I bring on some of the most creative and the top leaders in the space of LD to talk about what they're doing. And I am so excited to bring on these two individuals, Tom Bergeron and Rick Fiery, the co-founders of an organization called InventiveLabs, which was founded on the principles that people with ADHD and dyslexia and autism are powerful and are unique thinkers who excel in accepting any form of accepting environment. The lab helps cognitively diverse individuals identify and turn their passions into a livelihood through three main programs. We got career prep, entrepreneurship, and gap year. Rick and Tom, you guys are leaders, and I am so excited again to bring you both on. And for those of you watching, tuning in all over the world, we have an amazing community. And please share where you're watching from. And if you have any questions, just know that we have about a 15-second delay, so I'm gonna do my best to get to all of your questions. So without further ado, Rick, let's start with you. We have Rick on the phone. Rick here, I'm gonna do a quick introduction for you, Rick. Rick uses his decades of experience in creating and starting new businesses, coupled with his desire to change the trajectory of people who are being sidelined by society to create change for people with learning differences. Woo! Wow. So Rick, please share a little bit about yourself, and then Tom, we'll get to you right after Rick.
Great.
So Rick, please, if you don't mind, so how did you get started in this, and what led you to meeting Tom and then InventiveLabs? Did we lose him? Okay. Well, looks like we lost Rick. Yeah. So I'm going to actually pass that over to you, Tom, while we figured out what happened to Rick. So please.
Great.
Yes.
We can have Rick join back in too and kind of share his thoughts. But Rick and I, we both interested. We both started in the same software industry. We actually worked for different companies, competed. We're kind of competitors, although didn't directly compete with each other. And then eventually got to know each other and worked in a couple of different startup companies at the same time. As we had the last company, we sold that company off. We were trying to figure out what our next steps would be. And of course, we do another technology company. We'd been there and done that, and really started looking at what do we do with something a little bit different. And that's where the concept of InventiveLabs came in. It's the concept of let's work with folks. And we met a lot of people in the startup world who we felt think and learn differently and really excelled. And let's work with folks and let them kind of start their own businesses. Let's work with them, especially the younger generation, and share some of our knowledge and their drive and ambition and skills, and get some companies going. So that was the first start, was entrepreneurship. And as you mentioned earlier, we then started seeing that a lot of the folks had a lot of talents, but didn't necessarily want to own their own business. And that's when we started getting to the career side and helping folks launch careers and figuring out the best career match for them as well. And to the gap year as well, which is doing that with college age folks who may need college before they go off to their career business.
Wow, I have to say, being in the space of LD and advocacy, we always focus on schools and the path to university. But there's such a huge life upon school. What happens next? And this is what you're focusing on. It's almost like this bridge between when you leave school onto the business world, those who think and learn differently. And I'll share my story in a minute, but I mean, you've created a platform for these individuals to really capitalize on their strengths. That's amazing.
Yeah, we really saw it, as you just said, college seems to be a goal for a lot of folks. What college are you going to get to? What are you going to do? But for us, the goal is really, what are you going to do for a living? What are you going to do for a career? College is great. We're big fans of it, and it helps out in many cases. But until you know what you want to do, especially with ADHD or learning differences, if you're undeclared or you're not sure what your major is, college can be really challenging. If you kind of have a clear vision of what you're trying to accomplish, it becomes a lot easier.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Hey, Rick, can you hear us?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Awesome. Okay, welcome, Rick.
Good.
I
missed your great intro question, unfortunately. So sorry for that. We had a power glitch.
That's okay. It was a big buildup, but you know what? It's okay. So the question was, what got you into doing what you're doing now, which is InventiveLabs? I mean, you both have an extensive past in the business world. So what was your inspiration for getting involved in this?
Well, I did hear what Tom said. So I think Tom described our story as to kind of how it came about. I think really we came at it from the business side of the equation, and we saw that, in startup companies, both Tom and I are entrepreneurial, and we've done startup companies in the past, and building a team is a critical portion, a critical part of being a successful entrepreneur. And we noticed in various, companies and various incarnations of companies that the people that were the game changers were the people that actually thought outside the box. And, I'll date myself a little bit here. I think the first company I started was back in 1994. And that was back before I really knew or understood ADHD or learning differences, and the traits and the way people behave that had them. But I noticed people in the companies that I was doing, there were some that were just a little bit different. They would show up late for work. They would forget things, et cetera. But they were also the ones that came up with the really outside the box ideas that were the game changing ideas for the company. And I just noticed that through the process of just generating and growing companies, that having people like that thought that way were just critical elements for making us successful. In fact, I would argue that in a lot of cases, we never would have been as successful as we were as companies without those people on board. We would have just been probably bankrupt, quite frankly. So it's a huge learning that we had. And really, as time went on, we just saw some of the discrimination, quite frankly, that was happening in the educational systems. And then consequently, indirectly through the hiring process of companies, that some of these gems were just getting left, in the dust. And we decided, when we were forming InventiveLabs, that we both wanted to kind of give back to the community a bit, share some of our knowledge, and help people that need just to take a different path in life.
Wow. Really, thank you for not only sharing that, but for the work you do. And again, for those of you watching this, please comment your questions for both Rick and Tom and InventiveLabs. And now, tell me about this pitch competition that you guys put together here.
Yes. So the pitch competition was something we did after our first couple teams with folks kind of getting businesses off and running. We had some companies that wanted to assist and help out with services. So, legal firms that wanted to help with folks starting their company, business formation, with intellectual property, help with marketing, et cetera. So we put together our first inaugural pitch competition to have some teams come in and pitch with a series of judges. We brought some judges in from Microsoft and other companies to kind of judge the teams that were going through our program. And really, as Rick said, kind of some game changers, really ways to think outside the box. We actually, as we progressed and teams got bigger, we required at least one person on the team to have some type of learning difference. They didn't have to send in documentation or whatever. Usually folks don't talk about learning differences unless they have them. But some of the team that had dyslexia or ADHD are on the spectrum. And sometimes they were the technical person on the team. Sometimes they might have been the sales side, helping kind of sell the products, but someone working with that. And the goal is to help gain recognition for them.
Right.
Unfortunately, with COVID right now, we can't really do gatherings and pitch competitions the way that we did in the past. So it's on hold at the moment, but it's definitely something that we want to bring back to the community. And I think the key is really, you hear a lot of folks with ADHD or dyslexia, like the Richard Bransons of the world. Mm-hmm. And sometimes it's tough to relate to the super successful folks. And really the pitch competition was showing that there's people all over society, all over, that really think and learn differently, can be successful, have great ideas, and let's have a place to showcase what they're doing.
Wow, can I sign up?
We'll definitely ping you next time. That go back live again on it.
So, as you're saying this to me, I'm thinking about our audience, the parents watching this, of kids that may not yet be old enough to get involved in InventiveLabs, but I also feel that there's a lot that parents can do at home to nurture kids, because, look, there's this big drive and pursuit to college where there's a lot of focus around school, but at the same time, how can parents nurture their kids to think entrepreneurial, or take their strengths and help nurture those strengths into potentially maybe one day a business or in the professional life?
Well, I can jump in. I would say that, one thing that parents can do is certainly start to celebrate the strengths of their son or their daughter. And I think the reality of school is that not necessarily their strengths are going to be celebrated there. So at home, if you can pick up the pieces and celebrate the strengths, the wins, the excitement, the enthusiasm for ideas, and give people the opportunity to explore different directions and paths that they want to take, that would be ideal. And also, I think something that I try to point out to parents too is, try to take out of your vernacular, if you don't do this, you're never going to get into college. If you say that over and over again, it starts to become a real stressor. And that's not the goal for people. The goal is not to get into college. The goal is to find a happy, successful career, maximizing your strengths, and pick a career that minimizes your weaknesses, and be aware of that and find your path to that career. So if it leads to something entrepreneurial, fantastic. If it leads in a different direction, that's fantastic too. But there are certainly very, very talented folks out there with learning differences that have done well in the entrepreneurial world. And the way to nurture that is to potentially take out that issue of, if you don't do this, you're never going to get into college. At the end of the day, that's not the goal.
I think what's interesting too, Jake, is especially with younger children, when do you start having conversations about career and what they're going to do for a living? There's obviously some ages too young. If you're 5 years old, fantasy and reality get mixed up. They're as likely to want to be a superhero or a mermaid as they want, as far as kind of a profession goes. But children start forming their identity somewhere between 7, 8, 9 years old. They start kind of forming who they are and where they fit in. So discussions about potentially where careers could be, I think it's a challenge, because most of us, I'd say adults, not just kids, we don't know what the career options are out there. We see a very limited subset of careers. So, the ability, we love take your kid to work day, and not just limiting that to your job, but friends and family. During the summertime, bring your kids out, let them see what the work world looks like. And maybe not so much what career you want to be. Kids are pretty good. They know if they tell you doctor or lawyer, everyone's going to pat them on the back and kind of be happy about that. So it's not necessarily a specific career, but it's, what do you enjoy doing? I think you talked about, Jake, you've done sales in the past. So, if you looked at what you enjoy doing, dealing with people, figuring out problems and stuff like that, probably has skills that tie into sales. So if you can kind of figure out, does your child like to be alone and work by themselves on projects? Do they like working with teams? I think conversations with your child as far as what are the aspects they enjoy doing, what brings them energy, and what can they really kind of hyper focus on, really start looking at what they do well. And that can help when the conversation starts turning into career in middle school and high school and beyond.
Right. It's so funny. You just mentioned hyperfocus, and it's one of the, for those of you who don't know, hyperfocus, for those with ADHD, it's like a blessing and a curse. But if you know how to tame it, it's a blessing, because it's this state where time doesn't exist. You're just so focused on on the task at hand, whatever that is, whether it's an interest or a passion. I know that for me, when I was 10 years old, I started building model trains, and a big model train set in my basement. And I would go down there thinking I was there for an hour, and it would be 5 hours.
Oh yeah.
You know, and for kids playing video games, it's the same thing. It's like you're playing, but you just totally lose track of time. And, you know, we're talking about finding your passion and how to find the strengths and nurture our kids. And that's something at Superpower Consulting. I mentor kids around the world with learning and attention challenges who learn differently. And the biggest piece that we focus on is outlets. Looking at outlets, because let me tell you, there's so much we can learn about kids from we work with kids as young as 7 and their interests based off the things that they're naturally gravitating toward. Here's an example. Okay. I'm working with, one of our mentees. He's 8 years old and has a huge interest to how things work. He also loves Iron Man. But here's the coolest thing. Why does he love Iron Man? Oh, Iron Man's a machine. Okay. So if we look at why we're gravitating to certain things, we can start to connect the dots, and it makes sense. And that's something that is a huge realization for kids, but also for young adults and adults, to start looking at why we do the things we do. You know, Tom, you're a triathlete, right? Why are you a triathlete? Do you love pushing yourself? Triathlon, you swim, bike, and run. It's like it's pain all the time. But why do you love it so much?
Yeah, it just, I love goals. I love accomplishing goals, and it really gives you something to kind of strive and work for. And it's doing something different all the time. It isn't running all the time. Actually, that switching up the 3 is actually every day you can do something different. And to me, that's just more enjoyable than just running all the time or something else.
Right, which is ironic because I'm also a triathlete, and when it comes to making decisions between like what I want to do, it's always a disaster when I was younger. So triathlons literally gave me 3 options all the time, but you figure it out.
My wife and I joke because I'm not very good with time as far as being late and stuff like that. And for me, it's either on or off. So when it comes to something like biking and running, I make a good endurance athlete because I'm either running or I'm not running. Right. It isn't like I've been running for 20 minutes or 2 hours, just I am or I'm not. And so, for me, you can take time as a challenge in some places, but in a situation like that, not being able to keep track of time actually helps me out in an event like that.
Right. Now, Rick, do you want to say something?
No, I was just laughing at Tom's comment.
Okay. Now, you and Rick were once competitors, and I think this is really cool because we're competitors, now you're partners, and that must have taken the amount of humility and trust that must have taken to look at both of your missions to say, maybe there's something we can do. Take me through that, because look, in the world of advocacy for our kids, we're dealing with a lot of back and forth and not maybe seeing the same eye or competing for the same interest. But, how did you guys go from competitors to partners?
I think that's kind of interesting too. And I think, competition in business might be a little different than like sports or something like that. And actually, I'd probably consider us more like, today's NBA, where all the players know each other from AAU basketball. And so they're competing on the court, but they know each other outside of business, or basketball as well, compared to probably like the Larry Bird and Magic Johnson, who never knew each other, never played in college. They saw each other twice a year, and you could kind of really build up some animosity that way. So, Rick and I, in the industry we were, as it grew, a lot of people started changing companies and going back and forth. So it was actually a mutual friend that Rick had worked with and I had both worked with who connected us up to kind of work together. So I think from that case, we both, between the mutual folks we knew and the trust we had with them, kind of naturally built towards the trust we had for each other. To me, I think the more interesting thing is this is now the 4th different company Rick and I work together with. And I think along the way, you learn people you work well with. I think Rick and I have a lot of complementary skills, but really core values are very similar. So when you run into tough times, and every business does, when you run into tough times and have tough decisions to make, if your core values match up, you can kind of be in sync. I think most people in business look for purely complementary skills, but I'd say, figure your values out first, and then from there, find the people that have the complementary skills but share your values.
Right, right. Rick, do you have anything to say on that?
Yeah, no, I would agree. I think it's kind of back to the original premise of what I said earlier on is, with companies and with businesses and people that you're going to work with, it's always good to partner up with people that can do things that you're not good at. So Tom is a great person to go out and sell a vision and sell a concept. So I'm somewhat good at that, but Tom is really good at networking and working a crowd and bringing people towards us, whereas I'm more a strategic thinker on things like that. So we each complement each other. And when you're building a company and building a team, you want to get people that are all different. If you go hire everybody that all went to the same college, you're going to get a bunch of people that are the same. And that business is probably going to fail. So what you want to do all the time is look for complementary skill sets and maximize your strengths and minimize your weaknesses.
I like that a lot. I really like that a lot. Yeah, thank you for that. I mean, there's a lot we can learn, that it's not always about your idea, I'm the one that came up with it. It's about teamwork and collaboration. And just what you said, Rick, by having people do things or finding the people that can do the things you're not good at. Because let me tell you, when you're really good at something, there's also challenges that come with that. Okay. It's like the superheroes analogy. This is going to lead to my next question. But what's your favorite superhero if I were to ask you? Tell me your favorite superhero.
You mentioned Iron Man first. It's probably Iron Man, Captain America, go back and forth with the two of those. The Civil War, how can you be on both sides? But really like that. I almost went with Domino from Deadpool with the because luck was her magic power, and I kind of love that as a superpower.
I know, isn't that great? What about you, Rick? Tell me.
So, favorite superhero?
Yeah, tell me your favorite.
Or it would have to be Superman, and the only one reason: he can fly. And I'm a pilot.
I'm gonna have to agree with you on that one because Superman is also mine. But here's something cool about superheroes. All right. Superhero genre, we can like put it its own classification, is the only genre that both an adult and a kid can watch at the same time and have takeaway and both enjoy it, right? And there's something to say about that because why do we love superheroes so much? They're make-believe. They don't exist. We can't fly or shoot lasers as I'm aware, But here's the thing, I'm going to use Superman as my example because he's also my favorite and I'm biased, right? You take someone like Superman, right? You mentioned Richard Branson, okay? These are, the people that we know them for what they've accomplished, okay? So Superman is not Superman. He's actually Clark Kent. Iron Man's just Tony Stark. Spider-Man's just Peter Parker. Clark Kent started as a boy, misunderstood, labeled in school. He was a little bit of an outcast. His parents didn't know how to communicate to him. As he started to grow up a little bit more, his abilities started to show. That means he got more confused. Who am I? Then he had to go down this whole path of self-discovery. He was alone. It's a lonely journey because no one really understood him because he had these super abilities that people on Earth obviously couldn't understand. So what happened? We found him at the cave. He spoke to the ghost of his father. In the moment when he embraced himself, he put on that cape for the first time. That's when Clark Kent became Superman. And from that point on, he just kept flying higher and higher and jumping farther and farther. Even when the people of Earth tried to destroy him still, it wasn't until he saved the world that everyone embraced him. All right. Now, if you guys haven't watched Superman, sorry, but there's a point because the kids we're talking about, the individuals we're talking about, the Clark Kents of the world, Tony Starks of the world, we're on this path of having to put on the cape. And now we look at, let's bring this back to real life. We look at someone like Richard Branson, who is he's an entrepreneur prodigy, right? Also with dyslexia. He was a stupid schoolboy in school, according to his teachers. Daniel Radcliffe was told he should quit acting because he couldn't read. Imagine if Daniel Radcliffe, Harry Potter, quit. I can imagine what Harry Potter would look like. But you see what I'm saying? It's like when we can put on the cape for the first time and embrace ourselves, that's what happens. And that's what you're doing. That's Superpower Consulting. That's InventiveLabs. I mean, that's why our missions are so aligned, which is amazing. But my question is, what would you say is your superpower? And how would you relate your story to a hero's story?
Interesting question. Rick, do you want to take that one first?
Well, I'm trying to think of a better one, a strange superpower that I have, and I think it ties back to a little bit about what I said earlier. Is I have this weird visual way of being able to see the world in 3D and store. It's really hard to describe to people, but I guess the simplest example of when I'm driving a car, I literally know where everything is around me as I'm driving down the road at all times. I'm just absorbing it and processing that, and I can keep track of where everything is. So if something happens, I know where I can go. And it's a weird thing too, when I go down any place that I've been, I could take you back now. And if you drop me in the middle of it, and you told me you wanted to get to another place that I've been to, I can get you there. So I can get you to the Santa Monica Pier in LA from LAX airport, or there's a restaurant over in Long Beach that I know exactly where it is in my mind. And I could drive you there from Los Angeles International Airport right now, even though I haven't been there for 20 years. So it's this weird way of thinking and seeing things in 3D. And that's kind of the way I see, the businesses that I've done and the way people interoperate in this weird way. So like I say, it's weird. I can't describe it to people, but that's a strange superpower that I think I have.
Great job doing that, Rick. So thank you.
Jake, I guess I would say one thing, the folks you talked about, the superheroes, the Clark Kents and the Tony Starks and you mentioned the Richard Bransons and Daniel Radcliffe's kind of components. I would say persistence is a key piece there as well. And I think as tough as it is to have learning differences and struggle in school, I think you do learn something about persistence and fighting through and finding different ways around what might be the expected way to kind of get things done. So I think myself, like a lot of folks with learning differences, I think persistence is one of the things. I don't know if that's a superpower, but I think it's one thing that you build up and kind of learn to do. And maybe the superpower side, probably just brainstorming, thinking outside the box, just coming up with ideas. I think you mentioned earlier, everyone's going in one direction and I'll be like, hey, what if we go over there? What if we try that? And sometimes they're just crazy ideas. And every once in a while it's like, oh, that's interesting. And kind of get people to kind of look at that and try a different way. Actually, that's why I think I like the startup world, because startup is always about change, coming up with a new process, a new product, a new way of doing things. And, be going out to be able to evangelize the change. What's different and why is it better is something I've been able to do for my career.
Wow. Thank you. That's so cool. That is so cool. Both of you guys sharing that. That is so cool. I love asking that question. And for those of you watching, do me a favor. What is your superpower? Post that below. I want to know what you guys think. I always think that for me, my communication, being the bridge, ironically, was the thing that I was told would always be challenging. But that's my biggest passion, because that's what we're doing. That's all we're doing, communication. If kids don't know how to communicate the way they learn to those who don't understand, well, will they ever get anything that they want or that they need? to a boss, to a teacher, to their friends, to a family member. So I like to use this example of, imagine a highway, and you're on a highway going 50 miles an hour. Meanwhile, you're in a golf cart going 10. They're still going to the same place, but you are not getting there as fast. So what I like to do is I like to take kids on this journey where we're going to go on a detour over here. Meanwhile, they're still going. Then we're going to get in a rocket ship, strap in, and launch to get there. And that's not done through the traditional approach. Communication being the bridge. I would say
that's awesome.
I would say that more. Yeah.
That's cool. That's a great, we do a lot of aptitude with folks we kind of work with as well. And, one of the tests from U-Science we do, there's, the generalist and the specialist, which a lot of people have. But then there's the liaison, that person that can connect those two together and connect different groups together. And for us, that's just an amazing skill. I think the brightest people are the ones who can take a complex concept and really break it down into simple terms that everyone can understand. To me, that's like one of the superpowers. When I watch people do that, I think that's great. So that communication and liaison piece is just so critical, I think, for communication, for organizations to work, for helping individuals become part of a team and work together.
Right. I mean, education and politics. I mean, it's like if you don't know how to communicate to those who don't understand, you will never get anything across. It's just like, look at Congress. You know what I'm saying? It's just like, look what's going on. So that's why what you're doing is great, because you're giving individuals a platform to not only be master communicators, but they're doing it through a found passion. And that's something that I think is amazing. And that's something that I personally strive to work on with the kids that I mentor, young adults. But for you, it's really amazing. So with that being said, I'll have, I would say, one final question. Then we'll jump off. And if you guys have any questions for me, or I'm going to stay on after our call to answer any more questions. But the title of our chat today is How Thinking Differently Will Change Our Worlds. And I'm going to open that up. How is thinking differently going to change our world? I'll let that sit for a minute if you guys need a minute to think about that.
Yeah.
In the meantime, while you think, I'll do a quick announcement, okay? Yeah. On Thursday, 2:15 p.m., I am bringing on the Vice President of Nessie Learning, which is a international education platform. And her name's Tiffany James. She's awesome. Superpower Consulting is a partner with them. And Nessie's doing some great work. So definitely check us out at 2:15 Thursday Eastern time. So, all right, now we're back.
All right. Want to jump in first in that, Rick?
Okay.
I can take a run at it, because I think you'll probably follow on with something different after me.
Okay, great.
So I would say thinking differently has already changed the world. And I think the examples that you gave earlier, Richard Branson being one, with the way that he's thinking about getting into space, and has taken on some of the airlines and the transatlantic routes and all the other things that he's done. But also, if you think of Steve Jobs and some of the ways that he's transformed industries, you can just go industry by industry and find, again, I think the game changers, the people that are thinking way outside the box, are the ones that are creating the next paradigm in all of these companies in the past. So if you want to see how thinking differently can change the world and change the future, look back. It already has, and that's going to continue. And the same people that think outside the box and that can ideate and come up with ideas that are game changers, those are the ones that are going to change the world in the future. So it's going to continue. And I think just look back to, the Wright brothers, Henry Ford, all those people that had visions. Many of them had learning differences. And if you just go down that list, it's almost astonishing sometimes. Historically, you can look back and find out that all of those folks at some level had some form of learning difference along the way. So I think the history is showing that that's what changes the world, and I think it's just going to continue.
Yeah, it's interesting, Rick. Probably because we worked together for a while. I was kind of going down the same path. I was looking back at kind of where folks changed. I guess my thought process was thinking a little, I think unfortunately right now, I think it's becoming more and more difficult as opposed to easier in some ways. We talked earlier about that kind of path, get good grades in school, go to college, leave, get a good job. And I also think right now in our society, we really value consistently being on, especially with all the tools, electronic tools or whatever. If you look back at a lot of the great thinkers over time, Darwin and others, they had peaks and troughs in their career. They had really tough times in life. And it's really tough in society today to have, not in a bad year, but a bad month or a bad couple of weeks. It's really tough kind of in work. But allowing some of the folks who are the game changers to have those peaks and troughs where they have moments of brilliance, but then also you don't necessarily have to be productive every single minute. And even looking at places like Silicon Valley, what it is today is startups with a bunch of Stanford grads. And there's some nice things coming out and some cool things, but it's different than it was, in the 60s, 70s, where you had folks without degrees just going out to California, love to tinker, love to play around with things. And I think the innovation back then was probably a bit more impressive than it necessarily is today. So I think building places where the innovative thinkers can be, not necessarily being on every moment all the time, but really letting them be outside the box, have those moments of brilliant to kind of drive innovation going forward.
Wow.
So I don't know if we answered your question, Jake, but
no, hey, there is no right or wrong way to answer this question.
Yeah.
So, wow. Thank you for that, guys. I appreciate it. We did have a question from our one of our watchers. I'm really interested to hear more about your company. Do you actively seek out neurodiverse people, or does it just happen organically? Can you tell us more about that?
Sure, I can run with that one. So we definitely are actively seeking out people that have learning differences or are just highly creative, and we have places where they can come and really exercise their skills and discover more about themselves and directions that they want to take going forward. So all of our programs are based on that. We have career prep, gap year, entrepreneurship, and then ultimately a pitch competition if people want to go in that direction. And if people are interested in that, they can just take a look at our website and reach out to us.
Awesome. I think it's important too that we don't necessarily require a learning difference or component. I think we have a lot of folks who feel like they may not fit into typical society for whatever reason. We spend a lot of time working in the groups with ADHD, dyslexia, autism. So that is the folks who tend to gravitate to us, but it's not necessarily a requirement. We could do a whole separate episode just talking about acceptance and acceptance versus accommodations. And for us, accepting folks for who they are, what their strengths are, where their challenges are just a big part of working with them. And we all have differences. Doesn't matter whether you have a label that's tied in with a learning difference or not. We all have different ways of learning and thinking, and letting folks accept who they are, embrace who they are. And a lot of times for folks, it's folks with a year acceptance while they're in our program to build up that confidence to be able to go on and do the things that they really have the capability and the aptitudes to be able to go and do.
Wow, thank you. Thanks for that. And where can people find you? How can they inquire, or if they want to contact you guys, what would you? How can people find you?
So the website has a lot of good information. That's InventiveLabs.org. And both Rick and I are on there. You can connect with us as an info, where if you send it to us, one of us is going to pick up with that as well. So that's definitely a great way to get in touch with us. And we love, setting up calls with folks. We quite often have people in for tours, not necessarily in today's current environment, but we've done virtual tours and other components as well.
Right. Awesome. Thank you. Thank you. And if you are interested in the Discovery Superpowers mentorship program, we now have the wait list, but please reach out to me, because we're going to be accepting people again in August. at jake@superpowerconsulting.com, or just shoot me a message. And again, I'm going to be on answer questions. And Rick, Tom, thank you guys so much. Really. Thank you.
Awesome.
And
Thanks, Jake.
yeah, you got it. You got it. And yeah, I have a feeling this is not going to be the last live stream together.
Awesome.
Got a lot to talk about.
Great.
All right. Have a wonderful evening.
Thanks. Yeah. Thanks for having us.
All right.
Take
Bye now.
care.